ultimately, as a deeply feminist human, my take is that those of us who are the 80% autoimmune situation, who are women, we're the canaries in the coal mine. We are the majority of folks who are being diagnosed with these disorders. And I think it's because the patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist systems that have been designed to keep us obedient are not working. And our bodies have been the first ones to revolt.
Hi, and welcome to the Bouncing Back podcast. I'm your host, Melissa McCurley, and after my own journey with autoimmune disease, I created this podcast to share tools, strategies, and inspiring stories for other professionals who are navigating life and business with chronic illness. If you haven't yet joined our Facebook group, please check out Bouncing Back Podcast, where we continue this conversation. And I'm super excited to introduce to you today our special guest, Lauren Freedman. She is a menopause lifestyle coach. She coaches people with chronic illness, neurodivergence, perimenopause, and she's the host of an award-winning podcast, Uninvisible Pod. She's also recognized as a LinkedIn top coach in patient advocacy. Welcome to the show, Lauren. I'm so excited to hear about what you do and how you work with our population.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, welcome. I guess let's start. I saw in your bio that you were inspired by your own journey to focus on this work. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it brought you to this place in your coaching?
Sure thing. So I became a patient advocate before I even came to coaching. And that happened because I got sick. I, at the time, was in the midst of a career change. I didn't know which way was up, where to look for support. And as I reached out to my community, I was already doing a bit of this because I was writing a bit about women's health and hygiene and have always had an activist's soul. And so when I started with the first reaction I had, which was to reach out to my network, I started hearing from so many people, largely women in my network, who started saying to me, I've had this health crisis, I've had this going on. And it was all women in their 30s. And some were even people who I had lived with, that I was close with, who were like, oh yeah, I have a genetic disorder, never told you. And I was like, we're not even talking about menstruation. We're not even talking about bleeding. Why are we not also talking about the fact that a lot of us seem to be having these health crises start to happen at a certain time? I now understand that time as maybe for some of us, the onset or early onset of perimenopause. But it was also pretty noteworthy because there were so many folks that I knew and I thought I knew, but I didn't know the whole story. Just goes to show you can't read a book by its cover, can't judge a book by its cover. So as I was having these conversations, it was helping me find my way through the experience. I was learning how to take care of myself, how to advocate for myself, and navigating the complexities of being a patient with multiple symptoms and being siloed into different departments in hospitals and experiencing medical gaslighting early on as well. And I was able to get answers relatively quickly. But the more I talked to different people, the more I realized that was just luck. And because the conversations were helping me find my feet, because I'd had the wherewithal to even ask, because I was sharing so openly about what I was going through, of course, with the permission of the people that I was talking to, I started the podcast. Now, I have a background as an actor and voice actor. That was my prior career.
Me too.
Amazing.
Me too.
So love that for us, right? So getting in front of a microphone is really a straightforward, organic outgrowth of that work for us. We know how to do it. And so I started having those conversations and hitting record, and immediately was thrust into this patient advocacy world. And through that work, started having people reach out to me and say, how are you dealing with XYZ symptom? How are you dealing with this diagnosis? What are people saying? And that led me really naturally to health coaching. So I was certified back in 2021. I've been working in the health coaching field since then. And my work on the podcast over about 5 years, the conversations became meditations on identity and the ways in which we are perceived by the people who are offering us care, whether that's emotional, logistical, medical, what have you, but the ways in which we are seen by others is affecting our care. And a lot of that was really using patient stories to create a platform to talk about injustice at the end of the day. And so that part of the patient advocacy work was always really important to me. And so that has bled into my coaching work as well. And so I bring a social justice patient advocacy lens to health coaching. As I started health coaching, I got into the neurodivergence space. And of course, there's a lot of overlap with chronic conditions and disability. And then the next gap that I identified was that I was talking to a lot of women who were perimenopausal or menopausal and not getting appropriate support, as that story of our hormones as women had entered the chat or the zeitgeist, if you will. And while more and more information is becoming publicly available, they weren't necessarily seeing that play out in their doctor's appointments, or they were dealing with people who really weren't supporting them appropriately. So then I was like, okay, let me get trained in the perimenopause, menopause space so that I can properly support these women too. So that's been the next phase of the work as well. And so I'm working across these different avenues to try to provide comprehensive care, help people learn to advocate for themselves, and hopefully put me out of a job, because right now I only have one because our system is broken.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. And it's a lot. There's so many things I wanted to dig into with that. First, let's start with, it sounds like you made a connection between perimenopause and chronic illness, that there's a timing piece or that one kicks off another. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah. We have a study that came out in September of 2025 that has indicated and demonstrated that neurodivergent women are going through, I'm going to use the word woman, but I have an inclusive definition of woman in my head. So when I'm talking about women, I'm talking about folks with uteruses or who are going through female hormonal experiences, just to be clear about that. But when neurodivergent women in particular go through the perimenopausal or menopausal transition, we tend to have, and I count myself among the neurodivergent group, we tend to have symptoms, particularly those of us with ADHD, we're having the perimenopause symptoms 10 years earlier, and the symptoms are also more severe. Anecdotally, because I navigate conversations with so many different types of people, I'm having lots of conversations with folks who are just undiagnosed, and maybe no one has mentioned neurodivergence or ADHD to them, but man, they are high performing women. They are all over the place. They are juggling so many different things and successfully, but all of a sudden, all those systems break down and they're full of rage. And we are all a little bit full of rage at the moment, too, because there is a lot that is being revealed in the larger context of women's health, women's rights in this country in particular. But what I was noticing was that these women were having the sleep disruptions. They were having the joint issues. They were having the midsection weight gain or estrogen dominance symptoms. And a lot of the time, it was starting to happen in the 30s. And so many women are concerned with their appearance. So they would come into coaching to talk about how they looked. And as we would talk, as we are talking, so much more is being revealed about the quality of life and what's really at stake and who's supporting them and what their medical experience looks like. And then as you start to get to know people, things start to unfold a little bit more. You peel back the layers of the onion. Oh, by the way, Hashimoto's disease and other forms of autoimmunity, varied chronic conditions, or maybe a history of a hormone-led cancer or something like that, right? Maybe I'm talking to survivors and thrivers. So across the board, people who have either had chronic illness experiences and are now spending the rest of their lives preventing relapse, or are also going through chronic illness experiences. We know there's also a lot of overlap with certain chronic conditions and neurodivergence as well. So there is this convergence of all three factors, right? The chronic illness and disability, the neurodivergence, and the perimenopause, menopause. And they tend to come in a storm. And I think millennials are being really hit the hardest at the moment. I'm an elder millennial, so I can speak to that experience, right? The injustices that we're also witnessing in real time that are unfolding in front of us, that's happening. And then we're realizing the injustices and how they've directly affected our physical experiences and how our environments are maybe not serving us the best. And so the opportunity there through the coaching work is to look at the lifestyle factors and look at the things that are within our control, our routines, how we are maybe cleaning and caring for our environment, the products we're using, the conversations we're having, the boundaries that we're using, how we're communicating what we need. And my sort of secret sauce becomes that conversation around capacity. How do I look at what I'm able to do rather than the scarcity framing of I can't do anything or I feel like I don't have enough energy? How can we actually look at what we do have energy for and feel like we have some agency again, whether that's in our healthcare or just in our day to day?
That's so interesting what you say about millennials. So I'm just a solid Gen X, right? That's mine. And I was on regular timing with the perimenopause and menopause, but when my perimenopause hit, my chronic illness exploded. But I'm seeing a similar thing. And so I thought it was like Gen Xers. And I grew up very healthy. Like I always exercised. I didn't eat fast food. In fact, we were like the family that went to Whole Foods when it was weird and gross and smelled funny. And it was just like bulk foods in bins. It wasn't cool. Like I've always been very healthy. And my friends, I went to a private school. So we were a little bit, had more opportunity and things around us and awareness about things. And we didn't eat the typical American diet, right? Like my friends and I and my kind of group growing up were very healthy. We were competitive sports, all the things. And like more than half have chronic illness. And my best friend was diagnosed with RA in her 20s. One of our other friends, psoriatic in his 30s. I have psoriatic and Hashimoto's. And I'm like, what is going on? I get that there's lifestyle factors a lot of people do, but like we've never been heavy drinkers, all these things. So it feels like an epidemic. And of course, in my mind, I was thinking it was like a Gen X epidemic because that's my group. But then you're saying you're seeing it starting even sooner with millennials, which does make, if it's something in our environment or some, and I think it's probably a combination of some things. I know there's a lot of people who say it's just this or it's just this. And I think it's a lot of different inputs on our ecosystem, if you will, that just gets overloaded. But if it is environmental, it makes sense that it would hit millennials when it's hitting you age-wise, while it's hitting Gen Xers where it's hitting us, right? Because the constant in that is the same time in history.
And it's a
if that
stress
makes
thing.
sense.
I would also say that part of the environment
Yeah,
is how we are
that's what I
navigating
mean.
stress.
Yeah,
Yeah. And nervous system dysregulation, right? Ultimately,
yeah.
as a deeply feminist human, my take is that we're the canaries in the coal mine. Those of us who are the 80% autoimmune situation,
Mm.
who are women, we are the majority of folks who are being diagnosed with these disorders. And I think it's because the patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist systems that have been designed to keep us obedient are not working. And our bodies have been the first ones to revolt. And this is where I talk often in my work about embodiment. And I'm now at a place nearly a decade on from my own diagnosis journey where I'm able to look at what I've gained through and frame it as a gift. It can sound condescending if you haven't been through that, right? But I promise there is a way for us all to end up there. But the gift for me personally was that I learned how to be in my body because I was so disembodied. I was so dissociated from my own physical experience because of cultural expectation that when I got sick, the only way to start feeling better was to start feeling into my body. And then I think what happens is that we have to feel more deeply into our bodies as we move through treatment, as we move through healing, if that is something that we are moving toward. And I say that because none of us want to hear get well soon when it's chronic, which means it will last forever and it keeps going, right? But just
Yeah.
understanding the framing that
You're like,
like
this is how I am today.
this is how I am today, right? But I say all of that because with that opportunity, I've been able to go, okay, cool. We're the first ones whose bodies are like, not for me. And there's an opportunity in that to change ourselves and change our systems. But we have to start with ourselves and our home environments. We have to start with our relationships. We have to start with the stuff that's within our sphere of influence. And there are so many folks who've taken that further and are marching on Washington and are changing legislation. And I have so much respect for the folks in the field who have taken on those challenges as well. And so we're seeing a lot of folks in the disability and chronic illness community giving back to the community through their advocacy work as well. And that, I think, is really inspiring.
Talking about disability, this is something that I would like to learn more about, and it's probably somewhere I'm going to get to at some point when I'm not running a realtor business and a podcast and still actively working on my, as we have to take some things off the plate. But I'm interested, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on resources or the situation for advocacy with people with chronic illness. I was lucky where I'm a realtor, so I'm in a job and I'm 20 plus years experience in that, where when I was able to start going to work again, even part-time, I was able to create my own business, like to design my own business. And that's an incredible luxury if you have it. I know some people do digital marketing from home, but I'd say at least half people don't. What advocacy do you see happening, whether it's financial or in the workplace, for people with chronic illnesses who have strong capacity? We just need adjustments, right? Our capacity is higher when we can work from home half the time. Or what are you seeing in that? And where are some resources where people can find out more?
Yeah. So first thing I'll send you to are the resources on my own website, because I have a tools section on my website at chroniccoachlauren.com where there is a whole section on paying for medical bills and getting financial assistance. And I've listed a number of fantastic organizations that can help with that if you're struggling, beyond the applying for SSDI here in the States, Social Security Disability Insurance. But workplace accommodations are a really tricky one. We're living through an era where there have been rollbacks on workplace accommodations and protections. But I do work between corporate and private practice, right? And I work with a lot of fractional HR leaders as well. And by and large, the story that I am hearing on the ground is that many HR departments, and this is not a blanket statement in any way, but many HR departments make requests that are beyond the bounds of legality. We are all still currently protected by the Americans with Disability Act here in the US, the ADA. And I did also just recently release a free downloadable PDF on my tools page as well. It's chroniccoachlauren.com/tools, which has a 5-step, here's how to start looking at getting workplace accommodations, understanding whether or not your HR department is asking something that is within the bounds of what is actually legal for them to ask for, and documentation, and also not being afraid of retaliation. This is the tough one, right? Because most onboarding documents and usually like annually reviewed employee handbooks are going to list something about retaliation. This would go state by state from a legal perspective, but retaliation is illegal. And so if you make an accommodation request and feel that you are experiencing retaliation, that's where it becomes this legal gray area from an HR perspective, but one in which you may have more rights than you think. And so, yes, a lot of folks withhold certain accommodation requests because there's a fear of retaliation or a fear of getting fired, right? Those are all really reasonable fears. And I think it's worth weighing out for yourself, or talking to a coach like me, talking to a trusted person in your life about what you're willing to risk and how much you're willing to put on the table to make yourself more comfortable at work, right? If it's at a point where your work is untenable because of your need for accommodation and you haven't been able to get accommodation requests met, like, there are next level steps that you can take. There's legal assistance that you can seek. So it's certainly, everything is a case by case basis, but in general, what I will also say is that we're allowed to use our voices to make our lives better. And I think that's something that a lot of people with uteruses need to hear. And rather than, I think it's a really common narrative that we look at these experiences through the lens of scarcity, right? Because we are all at the whimsy and will of a very ableist society, and very ableist legal protections across the board too, right? But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself what your quality of life needs to be and what you need to survive as well.
That makes sense. That makes total, yeah. Thank you. And we'll link in the show notes your website, and if you want to separately link your PDF, and then So your ideal client, a woman in her 30s, 40s, who's starting to maybe go through some symptoms of perimenopause, notice these unwelcome, I'm just going to use the word, unwelcome changes in our bodies. That how do they know, how would she know when it's time to reach out, when it's time to get coaching? What does it look like in her life? And then how does that make an impact for someone who's never
A lot of
coached before?
folks Sure. A lot of folks reach out to me when they're already overwhelmed. I always recommend being proactive, right? When you and I know, because we have gone through health experiences, that you learn to become a more proactive, educated patient. And this is where
Mhm.
I would say, if you're not already learning about this phase of life, if you're not in it, be learning about it. Be paying attention to some of the information that's coming across your social media. Be reading the books that are coming out from Dr. Mary Claire Haver and Dr. Jessica Shepard, and some of these other wonderful practitioners. Dr. Jolene Brighton's about to release a book on ADHD and menopause, right? So
Nice.
learn what you can as a layperson to better understand your experience, whether you're in it now or you know you're going to be getting there. The great thing about something like perimenopause and menopause is that it's something that we're all headed toward if we have uteruses, if we have hormones going on. If you don't have a uterus or have had one medically removed, you're already in menopause if it's been a year since your last cycles. Be learning about it, right? And if you are someone who supports someone who has a uterus or is taking female hormones, be looking at how you can support your loved one, right? But being proactive is going to be really important. So my advice is don't wait, start thinking about it now. The advice that you'll probably hear from a lot of providers in the menopause space is, yeah, by the time you're like 40, 45, perimenopause will hit. My advice is like start looking in your 30s. Start getting the hormones tested so you're getting a sense of what you're dealing with and what the picture is day to day. This is all information. It's all part of the picture to help you better understand your own experience. Those of us who have what was formerly diagnosed as PCOS and has now been renamed PMOS, polyendocrine metabolic
Oh, okay.
ovarian
Really?
syndrome. Yes, because it is not just a reproductive disorder of the ovaries, it is a metabolic hormonal
Mm.
endocrine disorder. Those of us who
Yeah.
have
Okay.
diagnoses like that definitely should be talking proactively to our providers about what we should expect when this time of life happens. And if our providers are saying, don't wait till you're 45, do they know your family history? Do they know your other diagnoses? Really ask yourself what feels aligned. And ultimately, this all comes back to, what do I know to be true? And a reconnection to self and a reconnection to intuition. And so that's part of the invitation that I would offer as an empowered choice for those who are in female bodies.
I love that. Benchmarking what your health is when you're healthy makes perfect sense. If you don't know what your baseline is, then if you start going off, a lot of us, I know a lot of us kind of drivery, career oriented people, we'll wait till we feel like a dumpster fire to do anything. And at that point, you don't have a metric. Like you said, you haven't educated yourself to the process. You didn't catch all the signs until they hit you over the head. And you never benchmarked what normal is for you because it's different for all of us. And so
Yeah.
the process of figuring out what's going on naturally, of course, at that point, it's going to be harder, longer, more painful, and probably more expensive.
Yeah. And just being circumspect and seeking second opinions when you need to seek them. I can't tell you how many women I talk to who've been to providers who go, yeah, but that's normal. Let me tell you now, periods are not supposed to hurt. And if they're hurting you already, then there may be a hormone issue. And often we get prescribed birth control. That will only mask an issue until you go off the birth control, right? That's where really looking more deeply at the hormones can be really helpful. And I fully believe in birth control on many levels, right? But also, if we're trying to heal at the root in a more direct way, that's where looking directly at the hormones might be helpful. You're allowed to ask for these tests. And if a doctor says no to you, you're allowed to say, please put it in my record that you denied my request. Some doctors backtrack their advice when you say things like that to them and will actually give you what you ask for. Sometimes they're trying to save us money. So really be thinking about that as well and look into your explanation of benefits to your insurer to see what tests might be covered and what tests might not. Work with what's realistic for you, but educate yourself. And I would also caution that as you are educating yourself, that you are
Yeah.
seeking evidence-based information as well and not just trusting a random stranger on the internet. See if that stranger has a pedigree. Looking at clinical trials and things, look at who's paying for them, right? But just be seeking actual evidence and
Yeah.
information rather than following an influencer and leaving anything without using your critical thinking.
I'm glad you spoke to that because I too am neurodivergent. I've had ADHD for my whole life. Didn't get diagnosed till my 30s. And then once I did, so many things made sense. But sometimes I see all this like TikTok, take a 10 question quiz and see if you're ADHD. There's a lot of things that people seem to be self-diagnosing and or they're giving the same weight to an influencer versus they would to like a study in nature, like the peer-reviewed medical. And yes, I love what you're saying is understanding the quality of information, first source stuff. If it's a study, who paid for it, how many different studies, and you can find that. And once you know what rabbit holes to go down to find that stuff. But yeah, otherwise you just end up, I think, even more confused because you get conflicting stuff and then you can spend money on supplements in 19 different directions, that whole thing. And so yeah, like social media medical advice is, I think it's a great starting point. I think it's a great conversation opener, but it's not the highest, best quality stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And look, we live
for sure.
in an age where we receive a ton of information and it's up to us to decide whether or not that information is information we're comfortable sitting with. Right. And so that's where the critical thinking piece
Yeah.
comes in. And if you have any doubts along the way, do a little bit of a deeper dive or ask around, see what some of the other experts might be saying, right? Like just get some contrasting information until you feel that you've gathered enough to make your own decisions because it is your body at the end of the day. And to the greatest extent possible, which is not as possible in each state, we do have some agency over our healthcare. Some, not all, but some.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So where can people find you? I know you're in a lot of places, and I'm going to link in the show notes too, but for those who are driving, where would be the best, like, top 2 places to go find you?
My website, chroniccoachlauren.com. It'll redirect you to uninvisiblecoaching.com, but that is my website. And probably on either LinkedIn or Instagram. On Instagram, I'm at laurenfreedman.co. I've just changed the handle there. And on LinkedIn, I'm like linkedin.com/chroniccoachlauren or profile/chroniccoachlauren. So yeah, but look me up, Lauren Freedman, on LinkedIn as well.
And then your podcast, what outlets is it on?
That's wherever you subscribe to podcasts. There are over 150 episodes available, Spotify, Apple, all over the place. Haven't produced an episode in a few years, but I've never said never. But you can also find those episodes as well as Chronic Coach Notes, which is my Substack, all on Substack too. So if you're looking for those, you can find things there as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do you have any parting words? We're kind of coming up on time, but we've covered a lot. But I also feel like we could go for 2 hours. Anything we didn't touch on that you want to hit here at the end or parting words?
Yeah, there's one thing that I say to all my clients at some stage or another, which is that you are not responsible for the systems that oppress and challenge you. You did not create those systems. What you are responsible for is learning how to thrive despite them. And with the caveat that you do not perpetuate further harm to others. So if that is a priority for you, right? I bring a lot of humanity into my work, and I think that systems
Make I
lens
should be.
is
We all have
one.
to live on this planet together.
Yes, exactly. And the lens that I'm bringing is one that helps people start to loosen the threads around the narratives of victimhood and scarcity that we end up in because none of these systems are built to adequately support our physical needs. And so when we can forgive ourselves and when we can work with the very broken system to make it work in our favor, which can be done, it's just learning some tips and tricks and ultimately being empowered enough to use your voice to get the care you deserve, because we all deserve to thrive. As soon as you understand that you deserve to thrive, find a partner in that if you need to, whether it's a close friend and accountability partner, whether it's a clinician who really cares about your welfare, whether it is a loved one, whether it is a coach like me, but find your champions and keep the flame lit.
I love it. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you for tuning in. Please rate, review, and share this podcast. It helps us so much. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of success. So until then, keep bouncing back. If these stories of strength and comeback hit home, you'll want to hear what's next. Click the video on screen to keep learning from our incredible guests on how to bounce back and thrive.